Hey guys, Kurt Hughes here. Today we're welcoming Frank Jagoda on the podcast. I said that right? I always
Yep.
have a panic attack about saying people's names right because I'm not convinced I know how to read. I've just memorized a bunch of words. Um, so
All
so
good.
Frank's here. Frank has been in baseball professionally for 14 years. Last year is with the Rays, AA bench coach. Going back in a couple weeks here for them. He's been a community or a junior college head coach. He's been a scout. He's worked for USA Baseball. He's walk your dog, cook your dinner, the whole thing. Anything baseball, Frank has done it. So really excited to have him as a guest. Thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks, Kurt. It's a pleasure to be on. I've listened to several of your podcasts and guests, and I really enjoy it. And happy to be here.
Awesome, man. Well, that's great. I'm just gonna kind of jump right into it as far as getting started. As I kind of mentioned earlier, I like to try to keep it light, and it's more about finding out who these people that are coaching baseball and are involved in baseball are, as opposed to kind of digging in and talking a bunch of technical stuff. Although that stuff is fun too, and we probably will get into that. Just tell me about your experience, kind of falling in love with baseball and kind of making that more your career.
Well, I started at a very young age. I grew up in a family that baseball was almost the centerpiece. My dad has been and still is the high school baseball coach in our area. He's been the head coach at Dunkirk High School for over 30 years. And actually, believe it or not, this February 20th, so in a couple weeks here, he's getting inducted into the Chautauqua County Hall of Fame. So really proud of him. But that's kind of where it started. Was always around older level players, high school level players when I was a young kid. And then, obviously played for my father and then went on to play college baseball. Pretty early on in my college career, I realized I did not have the skills or attributes physically to be a pro prospect, and really kind of geared everything I did at that point as a player to trying to learn as much about the game as I can to get into it when I was done, whether it's coaching or scouting or the front office, or being an agent or whatever those things are. Just try to surround myself with great people, and very fortunate for many of the experiences I had.
Yeah, man, it's really interesting. I wouldn't say that you and I grew up in totally similar areas. I grew up in small town Vermont. You grew up Western New York, kind of Buffalo area. How far from Buffalo?
I am about 40 minutes from Buffalo.
Okay.
So depending who I'm talking to, I'll say I'm from Buffalo or I'll say I'm from Jamestown. A lot of baseball people could recognize Jamestown because of the Jamestown Jammers, which is an old New York Penn League team. Now with Major League Baseball's contraction, there isn't a Penn League anymore just because of the no short seasons. So a lot of folks understand Jamestown if they spend a lot of time in professional baseball, but typically I say Buffalo's about 40 minutes away.
Is that the only where the Jammers where you're talking about? Is that one of the only non-college I wouldn't say bigger, but full on stadiums up there that are non-college?
Yes, but I would say that there is a community college that uses that field. So it's basically when I was there, I played at Jamestown Community College and then started my coaching career there. It was kind of like a double lease with the college in the city. So although it's not a big, like Penn Station or the Spikes, they play at Penn State, right? And certainly not as extravagant as that, but it is a nice little small college town, college feel to it.
I think I played there. I played this tournament when I was 15 up in Niagara Falls / Buffalo. Some of the stuff that we played was right on the Canadian border, and some of the stuff that we played was down lower. It was actually a brutal tournament. It got rained out. We had 4 days of rain, and then we had to squeeze 4 games in one day. But we played the championship game on a very nice field, had a full-on clubhouse. I don't remember if it had it was at the time far and away the nicest field I'd played on, and it was it had a full-on clubhouse where you could go back with weights and the whole thing. And I was wow, this is really cool.
Yep.
Kind of a cool 15-year-old memory there.
Yep. So I would say that was probably either Dietrich Park in Jamestown or Sal Magley Park in Niagara Falls, especially if you were playing near the border. I would say one of those two parks in our area is probably where you were.
All right, well, it's worth a shot in the dark on that one. But so anyways, so grew up in Western New York. And as far as like your baseball experience growing up, I mean, you guys get like a ton of snow there, right?
Tons, yeah. Yeah. We get hammered pretty good.
So like as far as like wintertime stuff, like are you playing like multiple sports? You're doing all that, or are you kind of like more like baseball focused?
Yeah, a lot of kids in this area don't really specialize in one sport or the other. They do play multiple sports. There's at times you see a kid, specialize in maybe football or basketball or even baseball. But most kids play 2 or 3 sports. I played several. So in high school, in the fall, I played football. In the winter, I ran indoor track and played basketball and played hockey. That was a bit much. That was stupid, really, to be honest. And then in the spring, I played baseball, and then in the summer, I travel ball, Legion ball, Triple ABA, Triple A Muni, those things. Travel baseball in our area didn't really become a thing right until I was like exiting high school. So it was that I graduated in 2005, and it just started to come about like 04, 05. There was one team, one organization, and then it's kind of transitioned from there just to keep up. But travel baseball wasn't really a thing. Legion baseball was still a big thing back then. Triple ABA baseball, which I think is awesome because that's a 21 and under league, wood bat only, and it's mostly local college kids and like your better high school kids that are like 17, 18, 19 years old. So that was a really good league. And then AAA Muni, which was no age limit, and you get the same type of college kids. You get some older guys. You get turns a little bit into a beer league, but it's kids don't necessarily specialize a ton here. It's becoming more of a thing with more indoor facilities. People like Charlie Karstead, who owns Full Circuit Power, and Ronnie Burnick, who owns Hot Corner Athletics. 2 really good friends of mine. I coached Ronnie at Canisius. I was roommates and played with Charlie at UB. Those are 2 well-known names in our area and have a really, really good thing going in regards to player development in the facility space and teams, somewhat like yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you played at Jamestown Community College for your first couple of years, then you went to UB?
I was the other way around. I went to UB first, and then decided to leave there. There was a coaching change, decided to leave there, and then finished at Gannon University, which is a Division II school in the PSAC.
Okay.
And finished my playing career there.
Got it. So you've kind of been like, we talked about this at the jump. You've kind of been a lot of different types of things in baseball, like really, really kind of interesting career so far. So like, maybe let's talk a little bit about kind of the difference between like, you've been someone who's been the director of USA Baseball for the 18U, correct? Am I saying that right?
Yep, that's right.
Yep. And you did that for 5 years. Okay, so you have that background, you have college head coach background, and you have I'm working in MLB organization background. So like, let's just talk a little bit and kind of compare and contrast like those roles and kind of like what's expected of you and kind of like how you've kind of had to be, maybe like a chameleon would be a good way to describe it in order to fit all those.
Yeah. So, well, first I have to say I was the director for USA Baseball for a year. I did work for USA Baseball for 5 overall. I just want to be clear on that, just so the folks over in Cary aren't scratching their head wondering why I was out there saying I was the director for 5 months.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'm very fortunate to work with them in the capacity I did. A lot of times what happens with USA Baseball is, and I'm going to start with that, is a lot of times college coaches get opportunities on a contractual basis to work an event, whether it's an East Coast Championship or West Coast Championship or an NTIS, which is National Team Identification Series, or a player development situation, whether it's the NTDP, 16U or 17U or whatever the case is. Typically, those are college coaches, or at least in the past, it was a lot of college coaches that would come in for a week or 2 weeks at a time, evaluate players, work with players, and then they would go about their way. So, very fortunate as a college coach to have that opportunity. When I started my college coaching career, I started at Jamestown Community College. A near and dear friend of mine, Anthony Barone, who's now a manager in independent baseball for the Milwaukee Milkmen in the American Association. He was my college coach at JCC. When my college career was done, he gave me an opportunity to start. And being at a junior college level was an awesome experience as a player, and it was an awesome experience as a coach. And then later on, as a head coach and an administrator, I really think the junior college route is something that should be looked at a lot more for kids, especially in the game of baseball. But I transitioned from there to the Division I level, and kind of like you said, being a chameleon. How do you go from junior college baseball to the Division I level? Although, be it in the Northeast, we were a very reputable program, Canisius. They've had a stranglehold on things in the Northeast for the last 8 to 10 years. Been to multiple regionals. 2013, I was part of the regional staff that went to the first ever regional in school history. We went to UNC Chapel Hill. And then I followed my fiance, now wife, to North Carolina. She got her job. She got her doctorate in physical therapy, and she was offered a job in North Carolina, and kind of left Canisius and went to Wingate and was there. And then now you're transitioning, albeit that's Division II down south in that area was something that was, it's the real deal. You're rubbing shoulders with some of the recruiting coordinators from Power 5 schools and mid-majors down south and those types of things, and you're recruiting the same types of kids. Wingate is an awesome private institution, has one of the better educations in the state of North Carolina, one of the better facilities. They've since recently won a national championship 2 years ago, I believe. Coach Jeff Gregory, who's been there a very long time, has really got that program rolling. And that provided me the opportunity to transition to Patrick Henry, where I was an assistant athletic director, a full-time associate professor, and head baseball coach. And then through that, did some stuff with USA and then joined the Twins.
When you were at Patrick Henry, the year that you guys, the regular season champs, 2016, did you play you played in the regional that year, right? And you almost made it?
We did. Yeah, we were a game away from the World Series.
Was that the year that you play Hartford? Did you play them?
No, so that we would have been USC Sumter, I believe, that year. Played Hartford. So just like, and a lot of people don't know this, but just like the 4-year baseball, there's Division I, 2, and 3. The same applies for junior college baseball. Mm-hmm. So Patrick Henry was a Division II junior college, and so Hartford was a Division I, so slightly different. We could play each other non-conference and things like that, of course, throughout the year, but would not match up in regional play.
That makes total sense, because I think Hartford's Division X too. So I was like, when I saw the regular season champions, I was like, oh, okay, like maybe they played them. I've had Tom Eller on the pod before too. Yep. Good guy. We do a lot of similar like hitting stuff, and I was actually at that game when they beat Sumter like on the last pitch to go to the World Series. So it was kind of a crazy thing. I was like, oh, I hope that wasn't him. That would be
no. Tom and I have connected a few times. We can never square up on our schedule. We've always wanted to. We just never make it work. Yeah. A lot of it didn't make sense for either of us because of where we were located.
Yep.
Patrick Henry had a turf facility. Hartford had a turf facility, and teams from the north would want to come south and play. And so it just never made sense, and it was always too far for a midweek opportunity. So we could never square up. And then he joined the Orioles, I joined the Twins, and we both transitioned away from the junior college level.
Yeah, for sure. He's a great guy. Big fan of him, just kind of as a person and as a baseball guy. So then you leave Patrick Henry. You get, trying to piece it together. So when you were at Patrick Henry, you had worked in pro baseball before that, correct or no?
Well, as an associate scout. So what you're allowed to do at the junior college level is you could be an associate scout, essentially a bird dog, a non-paid scout, helping the area guy out, helping somebody out, just providing information. And so I did that with the New York Mets. Their director of scouting, Mark Tremuta, is a family friend of mine. I've known him for 30 years. And he, just through my role as a junior college head coach and having draft eligible players and moving kids on to 4-year schools, my time and my interactions with USA Baseball, met a lot of scouts, met a bunch of people, and kind of lended a hand. I started with Joe Barbera with the Mariners for a year, and then and then did some stuff with the Mets and Daniel Coles, who was the area guy, and did some stuff with him. And it's just sharing information. It's not an official capacity title. I do think you get your name in the media guide, which, my dad, they send it to you in the mail, and I give it to my dad as a Christmas present because he likes that stuff. But it's nothing official. You're not earning a paycheck or anything. Maybe the area guy, if you're lucky, will take you out to lunch or something like that. But little things, when it gets down to the draft and they have a need late in a round, and maybe they want to go junior college catcher, they might say, hey, you played against this guy, you coached against this guy. What are your thoughts? Or, while you're recruiting, if you see something, just sharing information. And at times I would go out and, watch an arm, or be put on assignment when, so long it meshed with my schedule at Patrick Henry.
Yeah, got it. And then next was the Twins, correct?
Yes.
And how did that come to be?
Honestly, it was just through just meeting people and having conversations. And, that's the 2017 summer. I was the pitching coach for the 15U national team with USA Baseball. We went to Cartagena, Colombia for the Pan Ams, won a gold medal, and, just met a lot of people through that. And truthfully, I don't know exactly how that all worked out. But one day I got an email from somebody from the Twins, and I'd like to think that played a part in it. I'm not 100% certain, and just, hey, we've heard a lot about you and would love to have a conversation with you about a potential role. And kind of one thing led to another, and was offered the opportunity. And, my wife and I at that time decided it was time to move on and try a different thing, and, really see where this could take us. And it was a really cool opportunity because I entered professional baseball in a really unique role as rehab coordinator, which was a lot of work. It was challenging in certain respects, but it was cool because you got to work with players from the big leagues all the way down to the Dominican. And it was, 10-year big leaguers to guys who have been in pro ball for 6 months who are, returning from injury. And it focused a lot on return to play protocols, on field rehab. So I had to work a lot with our front office, all of our coordinators, general manager, folks like that. And then also had to work quite a bit with, the medical side, and learning, learning a lot of different return to play protocols and throwing progressions. And it wasn't just pitchers, it was hitters as well. And it was a really unique opportunity to understand the difference between, Dr. Elatrosh's return to play protocols versus Dr. Andrews, and understanding, why they're more aggressive in certain times, or why they're more scaled back. And so it was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of work, but it was a really great experience.
So you mentioned earlier that your wife is a PT. Has that, my wife does government consulting and stuff like that. So she's kind of like a very smart, business person. You should think about doing this, you think about doing that. And that's had a really big impact on the way I run my business, right? Having your wife having a doctorate of physical therapy, did that help you in that role? Is that something that you were able to bounce some things off her and kind of
Yeah, of course. There was definitely some things that I could bounce off of her. And I did that often. Obviously there's certain things that you just can't always share, right? But also it was also very it was very cool because we got to talk about things that were, we had a mutual interest in. And it was really nice to come home. She comes home from her day, I come home from mine, and we were able to talk. And I pretended that I could speak the same language as she could. So, but no, I'm really proud of her and all her accomplishments. And it was really neat that she was able to help me along in that process for sure.
For sure. And what is her niche within PT?
So she is specialized in orthopedics, manual therapy orthopedics. So she works currently at an outpatient physical therapy outfit. And so we obviously with my career in baseball, we've bounced around quite a bit. And so she's always done a good job making those sacrifices. And she takes her test in April, but in April she will be certified in manual orthopedics.
Really, really cool. Yeah, the manual therapy stuff is fascinating. We use a fair amount of myofascial release techniques and stuff like that. And I won't pretend that I'm a wizard in that, but it's something that's had a pretty dramatic impact on like players' ability to stay healthy. I don't know, like
Yeah,
their back flare up and be like, okay, I do this, and it's like, all right, cool, my back's good now. It's like
for
perfect.
sure. For sure.
So really, really neat. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So like, let's say you're the coordinator, you know, for the rehab. So are you the one like you're doing like putting the plans together, or you're executing plans they've already laid out, and simultaneously you're like putting people on rehab assignments to kind of like slow roll their way back into the role that they've, you know.
Yeah. So a little bit of all of that. I obviously had a lot of input in the plans. There's just certain things in a rehab process that you have to hit certain checkpoints, right? There's checks and balances. And then when you're dealing with a surgical rehab, there is some, one, liabilities. Two, there are some things that you just need to see out of an athlete, right? You need to see certain things. And there's some of it, depending on the person. Is it a 33-year-old who's been in the big leagues for 8 years and understands his body and understands what he needs, or is it an 18-year-old who the organization has a lot of money invested in, and getting back to get 40 at bats at the end of the season isn't that important, right? In the grand scheme of things, what's the, and understanding the difference between the two. In regards to setting the rehab schedule and those things, it was daily collaboration with the medical staff, daily collaboration with the coordinators in that specific area. Like I said and mentioned earlier, daily collaboration with the front office, especially if it was a big leaguer. Are we bringing this pitcher back as a starter or a reliever, because they will be able to pitch in the big leagues this year, but how many innings do we want them to get versus, what's the challenge between, hey, he's going to help us as a reliever this year, but we still think he's a starter, or vice versa, those types of things, right? And so just a lot of daily communication and being flexible and understanding that not all things are the same. Not every rehab process is the same. Especially when you're dealing with like hammates, for example, right? Like, how does one recover from a hamate? My dog just opened the door. Hey, Bubba.
Oh, you're good. My dog opens all the doors.
He might join me on my lap at some point, but
cool. Little dog, big dog, where are we at?
Little dog named Walter. So,
okay. Love it.
But anyways, just understanding that every athlete's going to adjust differently, right? Having an older guy who has maybe been in the big leagues, up and down big leaguers, in AAA, he's kind of on the last leg of his career. He's on one of those types of contracts where, if he's in the big leagues, he makes a certain amount of money. If he's in the minor leagues, he makes a certain amount of money, and the difference between all of that. And so it's no one day was the same, and it's really hard to say like, hey, this is the plan, because a lot of times you'd have something on paper and it would change daily and sometimes hourly, depending on. But the way I broke it down was, it was a really unique experience for me, not a great experience for the big league club, because we had way too many big leaguers that were in rehab that year that spent a significant time in Florida. And so I basically kind of grouped, at times we had to group the minor leaguers and big leaguers in separate buckets just because of timing or facility usage or need or whatever the case was. And so, that's kind of how we went through our day to day and just kind of built guys up. And then, when they were able to play, there'd be some, whether it's inning limits or at bat limits or whatever the case is.
Huh. It's really cool. I mean, I would say that quite different than like being a college head coach, like way different, right?
Yeah, it was an interesting transition because, as a college head coach, especially the junior college level, I had 50 players and one assistant. So I had a second assistant who was able to come a few days a week. It's just kind of how it was where we were, with our resources. And so as a college head coach at a very small school, you have to really like be detailed and diligent with your planning and you use your facility to your advantage, come up with drills or rotations that work to get the most out of your day, and so it was interesting because then you get to professional baseball, and if it's your turn to throw BP, you throw to a group, and then the next guy's up, and I'm like, man, I'm coming from a space where I threw to 25 hitters in a day,
right.
And so, little things like that. But yeah, it was definitely a change of pace, especially on the rehab side. You might be getting somebody ready to pitch 4 innings in a game, and you might be getting somebody ready to throw the baseball to 45 feet 15 times. And that's like a big accomplishment for them that day. Or maybe it's an ACL injury from a position player, who I dealt with, and who's a big leaguer, and watching him run to first base for the first time post surgery, that's a really cool thing for him, and those
Yeah.
things. And so it's celebrating those small wins in that type of role, celebrating those small wins and acknowledging them, because in rehab, whether it's an elbow, whether it's a shoulder, whether it's a knee, whether it's a back, they don't always go as smooth as you hope, right? And so they're majority of the time you're adjusting off of that. So celebrating those small wins and taking those in stride.
Yeah, I don't think anyone like wants to be hurt or rehab or anything like that. But like as someone who, when I was growing up, broke a fair amount of bones and stuff like that because I was just dumb and did stupid things. Uh, it's definitely a decent metaphor for life, because it's like, it's not always going to be like 75 and sunny. Like there's going to be times where things kind of suck. And if you don't get in the habit like of your just daily life of celebrating like little stuff, then like it's going to be a long road and it'll be hard to be positive. Not that you want to be like, you don't have to be positive all the time, but like definitely like I find that if I'm more positive, I feel like I live a happier life. And being able to kind of like be like, oh, well, yesterday I had a cast on, but like now it's like, or not yesterday, like a month ago I had a cast on and now I can throw X amount of throws, then like that is a victory, So
Right. Right. Well, and to be honest, man, when you're rehabbing in Florida, you want to pretend it's 75 and sunny, because it's really 105 and sunny and miserable.
yeah, man.
So, that is what it is too. But no, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of minutia when you're going through like a rehab process, right? And some players want to be pushed. Some players want to, why is a hamate going to take me 8 weeks? It should take me 5. Here's 4 guys who are already playing again, and they pop their hamate the same week that I did. Why am I being slow played? Well, what's happening behind the scenes? Is there a spot? Can you go to AA? Do we have a roster spot? Can you go to AAA? Do we have a roster spot? There's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that a player doesn't always know about. And as the rehab coordinator, it was kind of my job to smooth some of that over. And that's the same as my role as a bench coach, or if you're a manager in professional baseball, yeah, you handle the day-to-day at your affiliate, but there's a lot of things behind the scenes that players just don't know, and they don't understand. And quite frankly, like, they shouldn't, right? They want to get to the big leagues. They want to pitch in high leverage spots. They want to hit. They want to play 5-6 days a week. Like, no doubt they should, right? But dealing with, a catcher who's getting, 1 spot start a week plus a DH, or the 5th outfielder who's playing twice a week in a DH and he's only getting 3 opportunities, right? Especially as you get older and level, you have to deal more with the person side of things. It is a little bit more dealing with those types of things than it is, rolling out a lineup. So it's definitely about celebrating small wins for sure.
So the handmade stuff is like really interesting to me because, I do a fair amount of pitching now too, but like I kind of like have made most of my career on doing hitting stuff. And generally speaking, because most of the clientele we're working with are not like really like college pro players, right? Like we haven't really had a whole lot of problems with people with handmates because they're just not swinging hard enough to actually like break their handmate, right? But like a guy that works for me, Connor, like he broke his handmate in college. He hits the ball like 115 miles an hour, so he's definitely swings hard enough to, hurt his handmate. So like, I haven't really talked to him a bunch about like, okay, like what did he do to like kind of like get his hand back? Because there was a stretch there for a while where it was like he didn't really know if he could even like play that much more because his hand was like very messed up. Like what would you do like if someone breaks their hamate and it's like a very typical thing? Like what would be like a couple exercises that people would usually go to in order to work on that?
Yeah. So I don't think it's exercises. I just think if it's broken, get it removed, take it out.
Okay.
Because if you rehab it, I'm not even sure. This is a little bit above my head, but I'm not sure if a popped hamate could be rehabbed. I think you could probably mitigate pain. I think you could probably work on strength and those things. But if it's popped, take it out, because at some point it's going to be unbearable, right? To your buddy's point. Like, I don't know if I could do this. Whether that's pain, whether that's strength, whether that's, it is, you're forfeiting mechanics, you're forfeiting something, you're overcompensating, you're creating a deficiency somewhere else. And so what I would say, depending on where you are in the season, right? If you have 3 weeks left in the year and you're gonna, and it's a playoff run, and if you could manage it, fine. But if it's a month in and you're gonna get back in 2 months anyways, like I would get it removed. And now it's a little harder for high school kids and college kids because their seasons are so short, right?
Yeah.
The Division I colleges play 56-game regular seasons. If you're
Yep.
lucky, you're playing 70 games and you're in Omaha, right?
Mhm.
But that's 8 teams that get to do that, right? So if you're looking at an injury that's going to cost you 6 weeks, 7 weeks, you're like, geez, like that's more
Right.
than half my season. I
Yeah.
understand that. But from the professional side of things, like when guys pop their hamate, I would argue to say that the go-to is to get it removed, because you don't need it. It's just a hook. Just gets removed. The bone gets removed, and then you just have to deal with just the strength surrounding it, scar tissue, those types of things, feel those things. And it's not a real big concern when you hear guys or read on the report someone ripped their hamate. You just feel bad for them because they're going to miss time. I don't think there's ever a concern that their career could be in long-term jeopardy.
Interesting. Well, I read this Fangraphs article. I literally was probably like 6 years ago, and it was just talking about like how guys that were tearing their hair, or not tearing their hair, popping their hamate, or had like kind of similar like swing signatures, if that makes sense. And I don't think it was like, I don't think their sample set was like stupid high in the article, if that makes sense. Like they just kind of like grabbed a couple of guys that had recently had hamate problems. And basically the article was talking about how like guys that had come back from their hamate, like not like successfully, because like you just mentioned, like most guys are coming back successfully, so that wasn't like an issue. But the swing signatures that they were kind of making were like slightly changed in that, like instead of finishing like more like kind of across their body like this, where the bat would flip over very quickly, they would like hold it and the bat would come like higher in this
Right.
region a little bit more. And like I said, we haven't really had any hamate problems with people that like where they actually like pop it, but there's definitely some people that are like, yeah, I have some pain there. And like one of the things that we do, honestly, I just pulled it from the article and it's like, we'll just try this and see if it works, is that like we just focus on people trying to finish more like high, kind of like more over their shoulder versus like under their shoulder. And usually it kind of like mitigates that. Now, obviously, when you're seeing, 100-mile-an-hour fastballs on a consistent basis, and there's some times where it's like, you know, ideally you'd like to like rotate your body through it in a functional way, but like sometimes you just got to throw your hands to spoil a pitch or something like that. Obviously, that's an environment where you can't just be like, oh, well, I swing perfectly every time, thus I'll never hurt my hamate. But it definitely has been something in a training side that has been able to pull a little stress off it. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And you actually hit the nail on the head with the 100-mile-per-hour fastballs, because that's what I was going to say is, a lot of guys, and just in my experience, I've seen a lot of handmaids, whether it's, pro ball, I've seen a couple in college, Twins, Rays, USA based, whatever it is. A lot of times you see guys hurt it in training, right? Because you nowadays, like, and I largely agree with this, you train dirty, to play clean, right? You train above the
Yep.
level of what you're trying to play at. And so what I mean by that is, and it sounds like you guys do a good bit of this, is you hit wicked breaking balls off machines, you hit two seam fastballs off machines, you hit machines, you hit four seamers at the top of the zone, you hit sinkers, and you do that at a high level in training. And you're doing that with machines, and we all know machines aren't perfect, and so sometimes you do make contact at a point where it's like, oh man, that hurt, or like, and guys swing harder and guys are more physical. So you hit the nail on the head though. You get professional baseball, or even you're seeing it now a lot in college baseball at many levels, not just Division I, but Division II, Division III, junior college. There's guys every year that are 95 to 98 at the college level, or in pro ball. You see 95 almost every night at least, and that was in low A last year in Charleston for us. Whether it was us or an opponent, we would see 95 every single day. And the velocities these days are just they're so high, and which means if you throw a fastball at 95, you're probably throwing a slider at 85 or 88, right? And so you just have to train differently. And so I think the result could potentially be a few more handmates. Is the result worth, is the juice worth the squeeze? Overall, probably, right? Because you're probably going to, you're going to be ready to compete at that level. But I do think that could be a byproduct of that.
Definitely. Just for the listeners, because we just talked a little bit about a hamate, and I don't even know if our listeners know what a hamate bone is. Can you just like explain what that is for everybody?
Yeah, it's like it's a small bone somewhere in here, and it's like a hook basically. And to be honest, to the listeners out there, I'm not sure the function of it. I think that's why they remove it when it happens, because it doesn't impact you a ton when it's not there. So one thing I've seen is a lot of people to combat that pre or post hamate is the axe handle. The axe handle and somehow the way that fits in your hand and the grip and those things and the stress it puts on your hand. The axe handle is believed to be a bat that could prevent or mitigate hamate issues.
Yeah, and it seems like it's kind of almost like what I was talking about. Not that I'm trying to be like, oh, like I know what this is, because I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I am the czar of hammates. But like it seems like it has something to do with like what happens when like you roll over. Like if you roll over really hard, then it really cranks on that. If you don't roll over quite as hard, then it doesn't crank on that. And the axe handle is kind of like rollover prevention insurance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So, okay, cool. So, all right. So now you do stuff like with the Rays, and you're more like in the dugout. So like now your role is kind of like changed again. And so from like a dugout perspective, like now you're kind of back to what you were doing like as a college coach, but now you're not like necessarily like the head guy. Can we just kind of compare the differences between like, being a college coach who you're kind of like judge, jury, executioner in charge of all programming and assistant athletic director, walk your dog, cook your dinner, the whole thing. And now like, you're with Tampa, and what like are your responsibilities like now?
Yeah, so I oversee all the outfield catching and base running stuff. And so this year in Montgomery, last year in Charleston. And a lot of times the base running stuff is divvied up between whoever whether there's one or two base running guys there. That just depends. But really just a day-to-day support for our manager. They have a lot on their plate. That could be including the daily schedule. That could be transactions up and down. That could be releases. That could be, dealing with scheduling Spanish class for our Latin-speaking or Spanish-speaking guys, our Latin players. That could be putting out small fires. The manager is overloaded with quite a bit. And so I'm there kind of to take stuff off the plate of the manager. I'll also be in charge of the advanced base running report, every series, every game, and going over that stuff. And then a lot of just general scouting stuff, advanced reporting and things of that nature. But it is really just being there as a sounding board of support, to be there for the manager, and then also to work with, like I said, outfielders, catchers, base runners.
So as far as like some organizations, and like I don't know about Tampa per se, but I know a lot of organizations these days from like a base running perspective are doing like a lot of like really interesting things with like the way that they're trying to steal bags and stuff like that. Would Tampa fall into that category, or is that
yes and no. We want our guys to learn the game, first and foremost. So situations and when to go, when not to go, things like that. And we focus a lot on that. But there is a lot of new rules in the minor leagues. And so, finding small ways to exploit that, whether it's the pitch clock, whether it's the pickoff rules, whether it's both, right? And how much of these things could apply in the big leagues. The game, the higher you go, the faster the game gets. And so what works in low A may not work in double A, and it may not work in the big leagues. Or it could work in low A, it could maybe work in high A, it starts to taper off and so on and so forth. And so really our job as minor league coaches is to, one, develop our players. But we like to develop our players holistically. We like to develop them in a way that they are fundamentally sound. They understand situations. They understand our our cuts and relays and where we're supposed to line up. They understand our bunt coverages, our first and third defenses. They understand, they have a great understanding of situational awareness. And then from there, we kind of individualize a lot of our player development approach with our guys. One base stealer might, be taught it one way versus another. And, why? What's the reasoning behind that and those types of things. But it really, for us, we really start foundational. We really start with, teaching the game at a high level, explaining to our players, the situations and those types of things and trying to teach them that way. And again, it's level specific, it's player specific. It's not a one size fits all approach at all. But yeah, no, you see things out there like some organizations with the vault system and those types of things. And I've seen that. When I was at Canisius, we got burned by it in college on a handful of occasions, and it's an interesting concept. It's not one that I've really dug into a ton in professional baseball. But how do you talk to a player? And you hear a lot about cueing as a hitting guy, like what cues you may use to work with a hitter. The same goes for base running, right? Like I may say something to a specific base runner that resonates with him, but I may say something and I'm saying the same thing, but a different way to somebody else.
Yeah.
And how are we going to get to the result that we're looking for? And that really comes with just knowing your players. It really comes with understanding them as people and getting to know them and, working with them and allowing them to have a little bit of autonomy in their process as well.
So like if you were talking to like a youth coach or like a 15U coach or something like that, and you just wanted to like, if you could say just one or two things about like that base running that you feel like is probably done not as well as it should be at like the amateur levels, what would you say?
Just consistency, right? I would say consistency and teaching the game, right? And so we could say, hey, hard 90 every time. Well, that should be a given, right? You should play the game hard, right? But consistency in your primary lead, when to take your primary lead, consistency in your secondary lead, when should you take your secondary lead? A no out or 1 out lead at second base versus a 2 out lead at second base, footwork at third base on contact play, footwork at third base, throughout those types of things. Because there's certain things that should just happen, like, hard 90 every time and, hustling all the time, like those things, those are given. If you don't do those things for me, like you're not where you need to be anyways. But I would talk about the consistency, the small details of base running, because I think that's where things get lost in the shuffle. And again, like many organizations are different, right? Some organizations could really buy wins, they could buy players, they could do those different things, and they just have an extraordinary amount of talent. Other organizations need to win on the margins. And I think base running is a way that teams can do that. And, it's by teaching again, the fundamentals of the game. It's by teaching the situational awareness, hey, you may be down 6 right now and the guy's a 1-7 to the plate, but should we steal a base? Is this the right time? Because it might work when you're 15, but is it going to work when you're 21? Right. And so, and that's hard to do because a lot of high school coaches want to exploit those things and win games. And I understand that. Right. And so there's that fine line between player development and then winning. And so I think that's one thing that as an organization, we've done really well. I think if you do it the right way, you're going to find that the end product is winning in the minor leagues. If you develop your players right, you develop your people right, you're going to win in the minor leagues. And I think we've done that really well.
Well, it seems very similar to like, at least, and I think you made this point, so I'm like literally stealing the point from you because I listened to your podcast on the hot stove from a couple of years ago. You had said that like coaching in the pros and coaching or in the minors, and which is the pros, whatever, and coaching like at a junior college level is kind of similar because the ultimate goal is trying to like level your players up and hopefully winning is the byproduct of that. And yep. I thought that was great. I don't know, it's tough. It's like I always am trying to think that way from like a training side too, right? It's like how you play tomorrow is not necessarily the thing that I'm like super jazzed up about. I'm more jazzed up about like you in the future and like being the best you that you can possibly be, both as a player and as like a person. And I think sometimes like when you get to like that level where it's like for me, like I played in college similar to you, right? I played Division III. You were probably a much better baseball player than I was, but like
I don't know about all that.
All good, whatever. I wasn't great, but anyways, so like I got to a certain point where it's like, okay, well, I know I'm not going to be a pro baseball player. And I kind of like got to the end of that, and it became less about like, okay, like, what am I going to do like to make myself the best I can be like 2 years from now or whatever, and more about like, okay, how do I make sure that I make the most out of like the time that I have? So like my time to, or like what I was focused on kind of flipped a little bit. And it's kind of hard as a coach. And I think you mentioned this earlier when you're talking about like the rehab stuff. It's kind of hard as a coach to kind of like put different hats on in that regard. Cause it's like, do I like, if it's like a 13-year-old kid and I think they're, going to be playing baseball for a while, then I'm like, okay, cool. How do I make you the best player that you can be at, 16 or 17? So that way you can get the looks you need to land in the college that you need to, this, that, and the third. But there's other people that come to us and they're like, you know, 18, and I'm like, are you trying to play college baseball? And they're like, well, maybe I'll play club. I'm just trying to have like a good like final high school season. And it's like, that's fine too. I don't want to like, say that like baseball is not a sport that all should play. It's just like, it's a different hat to put on. And it's
Right.
and it's definitely like challenging, kind of like flipping hats back and forth. But I think like you talked about, it's like just about knowing your players. If you just know who they are, what their goals are, what their expectations are, then I think that like your ability to put on the correct hat is functional and good.
No, I totally agree. And I think honestly, like our manager last year, Blake Butera, who's now our field coordinator, he was awesome at this. And this is one thing that him and I really connected on was, we worked with, we have an idea of who may or may not get to the big leagues. And no one knows at the end of the day, but like, we'll have conversations, over time, and who do you think on this team's going to get to the big leagues? And just, just sitting in a locker room and having those, having those deals and stuff. And we, our staff, and not just last year in Charleston, but our entire player development staff will work with who is quote unquote the last player on the roster just as hard and just the same and just as much as we work with who is quote unquote the number one player on the roster. And I think that's what makes us great. I think we do a really, really, really good job of developing players. And so when we develop our players, they turn into value, right? And so they could be traded, they could be useful, they could fill a role, they could do a host of different things. And that's, I think, what makes us really good. And it is wearing those hats, right? It's wearing those different hats. It's, you're working with somebody who is a top level prospect, who has all the talent in the world, who is probably going to have some sort of career in the big leagues, whether it's 3 years or 10 years, right? And then you're working with another player who you're not sure if they're going to get past the current level they're at, or maybe they go another level or two, but your job is to develop them to the best of your ability and pay them the same respect as you pay somebody else. And I think that goes a long way in the clubhouse with the players as well, is like, you're going to treat everybody a certain way. And that goes a long way. And, and obviously in every organization, there's guys that are going to play more than others. Like that happens, right? Sure. But at the end of the day, you're going to work with, just like you said, you're going to work with the guy who wants to play club ball versus the kid who wants to be a first round draft pick, all the same, because it's your passion. It's what you do. And that's what makes, I think, our organization great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's more about, honestly, than anything to do with work or baseball. It's just more about just being like a good person and a good human to these people, like, I feel like if you're good to people, then, that comes back, a lot of reciprocity. So you just try to do the best you can in anything you do, and hopefully it works out, because you never know. Go ahead.
At least that's the plan. You hope the game pays it forward, but sometimes it doesn't, right?
Yeah, it's odd though, because sometimes like it pays it forward, and like you feel like it didn't pay it forward, and then like 5 years go by, and then something happens, and you're like, oh, okay, that was kind of like from that thing 5 years ago that I thought I wasn't gonna get anything from, if that makes sense. So like,
it does.
It
makes a lot of sense.
I try to like not expect anything back. I just try to give my best stuff, and then if something comes back, mazel tov. It's all good.
That's it.
So I think this was great. I think we probably can move on to like a speed round. At the end of all our podcasts, we just do like a little quick hitter where we ask a couple questions, and we kind of go through them kind of quick and just kind of have some fun with it. So,
all right.
If you want to expand on the answer, you're welcome to, but these are kind of more like, sentence long or, paragraph long questions. All right.
All right. Yeah.
Favorite book.
Favorite
novel
book.
or like whatever. It doesn't matter. Just favorite book.
Oh, let me see. Let me pick one. Team of Teams by General McChrystal.
I'm gonna write that down. Team of Teams. Okay. Pizza or tacos?
Pizza all day, every day from Western New York, man. Come on.
Is it good pizza in Western New York? I didn't have it.
Well, chicken wings are what we're famous for, but
I know
there's
that's a later question, but keep going. Yeah.
all right. Yeah, I mean, I'm a paisan, so pizza and wings all day.
All right, I like it. Best concert you ever been to?
I went to the Up and Smoke tour when I was in high school. Probably shouldn't have been there, way too young. But it was Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Exhibit, and Linkin Park.
Oh my God. That's a good one. That is a good one.
It was the real deal.
That's fun. All right, I like it. Favorite drill?
Favorite drill. Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you a question because it's going to. Is it defensive drill, offensive drill? What do you got?
You pick.
Favorite drill on the offensive side is any sort of competitive type BP. Anything where you put something on the line. There's a carrot out there for guys to compete. I like that for many reasons, especially in professional baseball, where it could be like Groundhog's Day, and it's like, okay, here's another day, and we play at 7, and those things. It is for coaches out there. It's a way to shorten BP and really take the load off of you physically. But anything that makes guys compete. So any sort of competitive BP, anything like that with a machine, whether it's, a launch angle type drill or a launch angle plus exit velocity, or whether it's, around the world or whatever you want to call it, execution type game, anything you want that day, anything that makes hitters compete at a high level.
I like it. Most underrated Bills player of all time.
Mark Kelso.
Okay, make the case. First off, let's tell the listeners who that is.
Well, he was largely a special teams player, so you could say him or Steve Tasker, two special teams guys. I would say
such a deep cut. I love it.
So I don't know why Steve Tasker is not in the Hall of Fame. He should be, but we'll save that for another day. And largely because I got to know Mark. I coached his son in college, and he was a really good dude. And then he was a part of the Buffalo Bills radio team. So. Yeah. Those two kind of
a little biased, but it's cool. It's fine.
Yeah.
So, tell me about this dude. So he's special teams. Like he was like a returner, or like.
Yeah, special teams guy, returner. Gunner, wore the neck roll. The whole 9 yards, and then he was a defensive back by trade. But you're just your typical like undersized dude. Played in the NFL. Throw his body around like. Running down the field like as fast as he could, just waxing dudes. So
I love it.
I would have liked to win a Super Bowl in one of those 4 trips in the early 90s, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I have a confession to make, and it's that I'm a Cowboys fan. So
well, I know because I heard that on that podcast.
Oh no!
I just don't. I don't know what's worse, you being from like the New England area and being a Patriots fan, or you being a Cowboys fan. So. Honestly, like you were probably going to be 0 for 2 either way.
Yeah, I hear you, man. My the same guy I was telling you about, Connor, the one that works with me. Yeah. He picks on me so much. He's from Seattle, and he's like a Seahawks fan or whatever. And anytime, because I'm from Vermont, there was no teams that like were in my state. Like we have a super small state. There's no teams that are going to be there, right? So I never really like thought of myself as like, oh, I'm a New Englander, thus I should like the Patriots or the Celtics or whatever. Although I kind of like the Celtics. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't like them at all. Anyways, he's always like, hey man, like, how was Dallas? Like, did you like growing up in Dallas? Like, oh, cool. Like, are you a Yankee fan? Did you like growing up in like in New York City? I was like, shut up, Connor.
Right.
Favorite wing spot in Buffalo?
Oh, Gabriel's Gate, hands down. Gabriel's Gate. It's on Allen Street, right down there in Allentown. You cannot get any better than that.
And you're about the blue cheese, right? You're not about the ranch, or are you about the ranch?
Oh, blue cheese all day.
Me too.
And you know what? A sign of a really good chicken wing, you don't even need to use blue cheese unless you like actually, want blue cheese.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a sign of a good wing.
We went to Duff's when we were up there, the original spot. That was fun.
That's fair.
It was-
That's fair.
I think it was good. I mean, it was one of the better wings I've ever had.
Sure.
I'm not gonna lie about it. It was good.
Yeah. So the Anchor Bar is home of the original wing. And probably unpopular opinion here, but I don't even put them in my top 5. So,
You know,
Yeah.
don't they have like a chain now? Because I don't they have one in the airport? Because we went to
Yeah.
Anchor Bar in the airport
Yep.
on the way, and like the Bills game was on. It was the Bills Vikings game, the one that the Bills ended up losing. I'm sorry, dude. Didn't mean to just dunk it
No,
on you.
that's all right. But
So we were
by
like,
the way, that cost them the 1 seed. So
yeah, that's true. So yeah, so we went to Anchor Bar like in the airport. I like ate like my body weight in wings that weekend, and like
so
we got
easy to
them,
do.
and I don't know, they were like all right. It wasn't like I don't think it was all that great, but it also wasn't the original place. The airport one is obviously not the original place, so it's like I think next time we go, I'm gonna have to bounce around a little bit.
Yeah, and when you do that, so the Anchor Bar is kind of near Canisius College's campus.
Okay.
So I'll connect you with their head coach just so you could start pumping some of your guys up north.
All right,
You know,
man.
we'll
That
do
sounds
that.
good. That sounds good. Well, this was awesome. Thanks so much for hopping on. Do you have anything that you want to like? I always say this at the end. You want to like plug or like talk about or things that are important to you?
No, first of all, I just want to appreciate say thanks, and I appreciate you asking me to come on, and looking forward to listening to the end product. And I one of the things you and I talked about a little bit before we started the call was just kind of guys getting into professional baseball or college coaches and things like that. The biggest thing out there is, to me, just know your players. Really get to know them, understand that they're not assets, they're not numbers, they are people. And that's players, that's staff. At the end of the day, there's a goal, and in some aspects there's a business side of things, but I think the more you treat your people with respect, the better you treat your people, the more you're going to get out of them. And you never know what somebody's dealing with on a daily basis, so come into things with an open mind, and seek to understand instead of seek to be understood. So I think that's the biggest thing. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to following along and listening to the rest of your podcast.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.